Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Izuku has a healing quirk part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends, and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. It was about a month after Midoriya Izuku turned 4 that he discovered the first thing about his quirk. It was a rainy, gross, wet and cold day, but it was great because his bestest friend in the whole world, Kakin, was over. They were stuck inside, but they were having a blast, right up until Kakin had started calling Izuku Deku again for not having his quirk yet. It was starting to become something almost mean to say, and in an effort to avoid the teasing, Izuku suggested they go after the cookie jar that his mother had placed on the top shelf in the kitchen. Kakin agreed because Inko made the yummiest cookies, and then they proceeded to drag a chair to the countertop and try and reach up. But 4-year-olds are short, so Kakin yelled for Deku to get on his shoulders while he stood on the chair. Izuku did, and amazingly it was actually the perfect height to reach out for the cookies. The kid's plan would have worked too if Inko had not chosen that moment to open the door to check out why the normally loud 4-year-olds were being oh so quiet. Surprise, the two boys lost their balance and fell to the hard kitchen tile with 2 shouts and a sickening crack. Izuku, being the one up higher, had smashed his face into the countertop on the way down and was bleeding heavily. He sat crying on the kitchen floor with a bruise, but healthy, Kakin yelling at him not to be a crybaby about it. In another universe, this would have been the last play date the two had. Inko had not liked how things turned out with her baby's broken nose, and his friend yelling at him, and by the time she thought of asking her son if he wanted his friends over again, Izuku had stopped asking for Kakin to come over. However, in this universe, Izuku had a quirk. A healing one. About 10 seconds into his tears he realized his nose didn't hurt anymore, and a second after that he heard 2 gasps of astonishment. Izuku's face was fixing itself, the skin almost alive knitting itself around the wound, perfectly healing the broken nose. Izuku quickly demanded to watch in a mirror as his quirk came to life. Roughly a minute and a half later the broken nose was cleared, and all that was left was flawless skin and some dried blood that his mother cleaned off his face. And even though it had hurt when Izuku broke his nose, and his mother removed all the cookies from the house, he couldn't stop smiling because he had a quirk, and he was going to be a hero. The second thing Izuku found out about his quirk was 3 days after the cookie incident when Izuku was at the doctor's. The doctor was a bit confused as to why the son of a fire breather and a minor telekinetic produced a self-healing quirk, so in an effort to understand the boy's quirk more, he asked to run a few DNA tests. Now a lot about quirks is still unknown, but many quirks repeat themselves in a population base, and when their DNA is compared, quirkologists can tell you if you have an already existing quirk. There are millions of DNA sets on file, so most of the time there was at least something similar to match a quirk with. However, Izuku's DNA did not match anything on file. The closest thing was a complete regeneration quirk that belonged to a late hero that lived during the rise of quirks, but other than a slim resemblance, the doctor could not tell the mother and son anything helpful about Izuku's quirk, like its limits or its drawbacks. While Linko worried over this, Izuku was thrilled. He had learned that his quirk was unique, and that he could definitely become a hero with it, if it was like a hero from the rise of quirks, right? Right. The quirk went down under the name regeneration. The third thing Izuku learned about his quirk was almost an entire year later. Kakin and him were playing hero and villains with some other kids that followed Kakin around a lot, and had been sitting in a tree waiting to ambush the villains. Kakin and him were the heroes. Deku was a sidekick according to Kakin. Izuku was okay with this, he just wanted to help people. Then the boys climbed higher in the tree to avoid being seen by a teacher, probably higher than they should have been. Then it happened. Both boys put all of their weight onto the same one branch. It snapped. The boys fell. Like it was an anniversary of their first big fall at the cookie incident, the boys tumbled down with 2 shouts, but this time they landed with 2 sickening cracks. Izuku hit his head hard enough to crack something painful in his head. But thanks to his quirk the world just dimmed slightly around him as his skin and bone knitted itself back together. It was hard to judge time when one is half conscious as their brain repairs itself, but Izuku was sitting up by the time the teachers had made it over to them. Then he turned to his friend. Kakin was hurt. He had landed on one leg and had bones sticking out. It was bloody and messy and Izuku felt sick. Kakin was screaming his head off, and he was oh. Kakin was crying. He was not crying a lot, but Deku could see the small tears forming in his eyes, and it dug into his young soul to see his friend like that. He wanted more than anything to help, and his skin started to itch. Suddenly he knew what he had to do. Pushing the teachers out of the way, Izuku placed both his hands on Kakin's compound fracture, and activated his quirk. For a second nothing happened, but then Dika's skin knitted itself over the break, and Izuku could feel inside his friend. It was strange. He could feel the blood and the bones, and he could also feel what needed to be fixed. What Kakin's body was telling Izuku's quirk needed to be fixed. Izuku willed his quirk to fix his friend, but it was taking a long time, or maybe Deku was still out of it. When had Kakin stopped screaming? Deku didn't know. But with his hand still attached to his friend's leg, he looked up and saw a face that would be burned into his memory forever. Kakin was, well, everything. He looked shocked, angry, of course, relieved that the pain had gone away, but it was the pure look of awe that struck Izuku. His strong friend that never looked up to anyone was looking at him like that. Like Izuku did the impossible. The moment lasted until Deku pulled his hands away, letting the skin unknit and leaving a healed leg behind. It was then Kakin started swearing at him for breaking the branch they had been on, and both boys ended up being sent home for reckless behavior. But Izuku didn't care because not only had Kakin looked at him with awe for a few seconds straight, but Izuku had learned he could heal other people and help them, and that all he ever wanted. The fourth and fifth things Izuku learned about his quirk happened later that same night. After his mother had come to pick him up, Izuku had fallen asleep, but his mother could not wake him when they finally got home. Inko panicked and called for an ambulance. Izuku had gone into a minor coma, the doctors telling Inko that regeneration quirks, especially one like Izuku's, need a lot of extra food and nutrients to keep up, and his normal 3 meals a day, plus snacks, was not enough. Inko felt a bit like a failure for not testing her son's vitamin levels and much sooner, but the doctor assured her no harm was permanently done, and with a new diet, Izuku would be fine again soon. Izuku did learn he needed a higher food intake upon waking up, but he also learned something far more interesting. You see, Izuku may have panicked just a little bit at waking up in a hospital room. His mother had stepped out, so he was alone, and in his shock, small sparks erupted from his palms. That was when Izuku learned that when he joins himself to someone else to heal them, his body retains just a little bit of the foreign quirk. It took a long while for Izuku to learn more about his quirk. He showed Kakin the small sparks he could make, but Kakin remained unimpressed. Even at 5, his explosion quirk was already strong enough to knock down walls, so small sparks were nothing. Luckily for Izuku, Kakin was reckless, and now even more so that he knew Deku could just heal him. This is how Deku figured out the little bits of foreign quirk he gathers stack. By the time they were 6, Izuku could use more than half of Kakin's power level. He got more for bigger healing jobs, like the time Kakin fell in a river and got a concussion, or the time Kakin cut off his pinky toe when he was playing with a knife, or the time they made parachutes out of sheets and jumped off the roof. Or well, there was a lot of times really he got less from small things like paper cuts that Kakin always demanded Deku heal. And well, Deku healed everything for Kakin. Izuku was 6, but he knew well he was seemingly indestructible. Kakin was not, well, not without Izuku's help anyways. Not that Izuku said that right out anyways. Kakin used Izuku as an excuse to do whatever, no matter how dangerous, and both sets of parents had been at their limits. There was only so many times an adult can tell a child not to play with knives or not to jump from roofs, or not to hold your breath until you pass out, and then the boys got into a fight. You see, even though Izuku healed Kakin multiple times a day, accompanying him, and pulling him out of danger, Izuku never once got a thank you. That was what spawned the fight that would separate them for years. The fight went bad quickly, with both boys having a warped sense of what was dangerous. They had not blinked an eye at blowing everything up. And did they ever blow everything up? They didn't just blow up one classroom, Deku and Kakin blew up 4 of them. Holes in the walls, falling ceilings, broken glass, the whole 9 yards. Every student and teacher could tell you how scary this event was. Both boys themselves have hazy memories of this event because they both passed out due to quirk exhaustion. Both boys were expelled, but the real fallout was with the parents. Izuku's mom and Kakin's went to war with each other. They had been friends their whole lives, but now they both blamed each other for their children's recklessness and getting kicked out of school while ruining it. It was an expensive affair as the school sued and made both families pay for repairs. Inko decided it was to move to a new cheaper location closer to a new school and hopefully away from the reckless behavior. Kakin's mother agreed. They also agreed to not let their children near each other again. For their own safety. Izuku would never give up on his dream though. And he would see Kakin again at UA like they promised each other. Izuku learned the most about his quirk as those first few years, but he did not learn anything hugely new about his quirk until a year before the UA entrance exams, when Mr. Yagi walked into the hospital that Izuku volunteered at. Yogi Toshinori honestly did not want to be here. It was pointless. But he had been pressured by Recovery Girl to come to this hospital, where a miracle quirked healer named Deku apparently volunteered. It seemed more like just another rumor to Toshinori though. Stories would pop up online about how Deku cured them of one disease or another. It had been a few years since the stories started, but recently an online post had shown up thanking Deku for regenerating a man's leg completely. A basically impossible task, even in today's day and age. It was then that Recovery Girl used her connections to track down exactly what hospital this Deku worked at, and gave Tashi no room to argue. She was hopeful as ever to find his cure. Tashi, however, did not expect much from this visit. Even though Recovery Girl's connections had assured her that Deku was real, there was no way they would have a quirk that could grow back things like organs. Yogi Toshinori also did not like hospitals. He had not originally disliked them, but the last few years he has spent so much time in them they made him depressed. None of the doctors could help him much after the original surgeries anyway, and they pitied him, he saw it. Every new doctor he met got his hopes up, and their own, only to realize how truly broken he was. So for the last year, he had been seeing Recovery Girl exclusively for his medical needs. She was the person he trusted the most and also the one with the strongest healing quirk he had ever seen. Though if there really was some unlikely Deku here, that might change today. The tiniest bubble of hope started to make its way into his missing gut. The Recovery girl insisted there was a great healer here, maybe he could let himself hope today. And then he caught his reflection in the glass doors as he was about to enter the hospital. No matter how many times he saw himself, it still occasionally caught him off guard. For a split second Tashi thought the man staring back at him through the door was a patient at the hospital. The first thought that went through his head was, God's help that poor sick soul. But then he finally recognized himself, and All Might had never felt more like he was unfixable. Nobody could fix him. What was the point? He would find some young successor next year at UA, and then he would run out of time. But today maybe he could still be All Might. He still had 2 hours left of his 3. He could skip this appointment and clock in, and maybe help. Are you lost, sir? Tashi was startled out of his thoughts by the voice, and coughed up a good amount of blood, before turning around to see a young teen with a curly mop of green hair and bright green eyes to match. Unfortunately, his coughing fit had caused those eyes to fill with worry, and the boy started speaking very fast. Oh no. Are you okay? Stupid. No. Not you, me. You're not okay. Do you need a wheelchair? Are you here for an appointment? Do you need to go to the trauma center? Tashi tried to reply, but only more blood came out of his mouth, and the next thing that he knew, the boy had picked him up completely and was running him into the hospital. At first, Tashi was confused. He was not normally one to be picked up so easily. Yes, he had lost a lot of weight, but he was still tall and should be too heavy for this teen, to pick up and run with the ASILY and with surprising grace. They passed the front desk, and Tashi was still too surprised at the kid's apparent minor strength quirk when the kid jumped, vaulted over a barrier, and landed in the crunch, only to keep running without hardly jostling Tashi at all. Strength and agility. What a strange experience it was to be carried like this. All Might was normally the one carrying people, not the other way around. Toshinori tried to speak, but he still had blood stuck in his throat, and he did not want to get blood all over the boy. The green-haired boy finally stopped running once they entered what looked like an emergency room, with cots and curtains set up between the stations. The boy checked a chart for a second and finally set him down on an empty bed. It's okay, sir. The boy said, I'll get you a doctor right away. Wait. Toshinori managed to say with blood dripping from his lip. I have an appointment, boy. I don't need an I'm here to see Deku. And then the boy froze. Oh? The boy said, and for a long second, he didn't move, only started to blush. The green-haired teen nervously scratched the back of his neck and smiled lopsidedly. Sorry about that then, you must be Yagi Toshinori then, right? Toshinori was perplexed. Who was this boy to know about his name? Yes, he confirmed. It was just then one of the adjoining curtains was pulled back, and a nurse dressed in pink scrubs poked her head through. She briefly looked over Tashi and then spotted the boy and smiled. Ah, I thought I saw you run in, she said, pushing a small ice pack toward the boy. Would you mind doing your thing? We ran out of frozen ice packs down here, and I don't want to steal them from upstairs again. Sure. The boy said, I can handle freezing 1 or 2. And grabbed it for the ice pack, activating some sort of small ice quirk, and freezing it for the nurse. Huh. And Tashi had been so sure the boy had had a strength and or agility quirk. You're a lifesaver, the nurse said, popping away again only to return a split second later. Oh, and the little doohickey thingamabob fell off the light again, and I can't get it to stay in place without it, would you mind? The boy sighed, and to Tashi's surprise pulled a small winged nut out of his hand. The creation quirk. And an ice quirk. A small jolt of uncertainty ran through him as the nurse took the nut from the boy. Could this boy be related to him? He was just about to ask who this boy was when the nurse pipped up again before closing the curtain. Thanks, Deku. I don't know how we function without you. Good luck with your patient. The boy must have caught the look on his face because he was once again nervously smiling and blushing a bit. Hi, Mr. Yagi. I'm Deku. Toshinori could not help the words that flowed from his mouth. I'm sorry, my boy, but you are. The boy Deku coughed and tittered out a small little laugh. I'm not technically a doctor yet, Mr. Yagi, and Deku is just a name I use at this hospital as a cover. I just have a healing quirk that allows me to volunteer through the hospital with a pass to use my quirk when supervised by medical staff. Tashi thought he was done, but without taking a breath Deku started talking again, and I don't normally take appointments, but Recovery Girl is one of them favorite heroes ever, and when a hero calls directly and practically begs for me to see one of her patients, you say yes. Yes, yes, yes. That's also how I knew your name because I already read your file that she sent over and you're the only one who could possibly have an appointment with me, and I'm talking too much, I'm so sorry Mr. Yagi, I'll just. It's okay young Deku, breath, Toshinori said. And Deku's mouth clicked shut before he took in a big breath and blew it out again. Now, why don't you start with explaining to me your quirk? Deku nodded quickly. Well, Mr. Yagi, my quirk is called Regenerate. It allows me not only to heal myself, but I can temporarily attach myself to another person and regenerate them as well. It's not your typical regeneration quirk. And it does have a few side effects, but none of them bad. Toshinori nodded. And what about the ice, and the creation quirk and the strength? Ha, you noticed that, did you? That's the side effect. I'm sorry for carrying you through the hospital, by the way. I do have a strength remnant and a perfect balance remnant, along with others like the creation and ice ones. I'm sorry my boy, but what's a remnant? Oh? Sorry. When I heal people either many times or for big injuries, I get a small amount of their quirks, and I call them remnants. Like the creation, quirk came from a girl who is aiming for UA, and she is always training too much, and when she was younger, she would often be in with broken bones, and overexertion for quirk training, and not enough fat on her body, so I would heal her. She is a friend now, but I healed her enough times that I can make things a few ounces in mass myself using her remnant. That is very impressive my boy. Toshinori was very relieved. This boy's quirk was not all for one. He had nothing to fear. In fact, he was starting to feel hopeful again. With such a unique quirk, maybe this boy could help him, at least a little. Yes, and my minor strength remnant came from my martial arts teacher. I could probably deadlift 4 of you no problem. And my balance remnant came from this awesome Parker professional with a quirk called perfect balance. But perfect balance does not come with perfect common sense, because he comes in once or twice a month with broken bones and pulled muscles and sprained. Toshinori cleared his throat as the kid started into a muttering fit. Luckily it seemed to snap the boy out of it with plenty of apologizing. So, my boy, you have read my file right? Oh yes. Deku said, perking up. It didn't say how you ended up like you are, but I know you are missing your stomach, part of your upper repository system, and not only do you have heavy scar tissue buildup, but you have become malnourished over the past few years. But don't worry sir. It's nothing I can't fix. Deku finished with a smile. Toshinori sat up straighter, the hope bubbling back to the surface, along with some blood. Really? He grunted, trying not to sound too hopeful and eager. Yup. I've regenerated worse than this, and I already ate 5 energy bars before you came, so I'm ready to go when you are. The quirk remnant thing won't even affect you because you're listed as quirkless. But Toshinori maybe was not listening to, or thinking about, the second part of what Deku said. All he heard was I've healed worse and ready to go, and the next thing Toshinori knew the boy was agreeing to whatever he had just said and was closing the curtain, while Toshinori took off his shirt like instructed by the healer. The green-haired healer then cleaned his hands and turned around. Toshinori was self-conscious about his scar, and his body outside his buff form, but Deku hardly blinked at the scar, as he places his hands right on it, and smiled an absolutely jaw-dropping dazzling smile at Tashi. Don't worry Mr. Yagi. This won't hurt one bit. And then the skin on the boy's hand seems to liquefy and move to join with the bare skin below, and Tashi could feel his insides changing. 3 minutes. That was all the time the green-haired boy named Deku needed to fix him. The teen was now sitting on the end of his bed cramming snack bars down his face, muttering about regenerating stomachs, and fat cells always seemed to make him require more food. Tashi in the meantime was looking at himself in a handheld mirror. It was like an out-of-body experience. Not only did nothing hurt, but just like earlier, he did not recognize his reflection looking back at him. But this time it was because his reflection looked whole. Or pretty darn close to it anyways. Deku had explained to him that while he had replaced some fatty tissue and muscle loss, along with restoring his internal organs, it was always better to build the fat and muscle stuff back on one's own. It also apparently was harder on the boy to do that much work unless really needed. Tashi was still in shock looking at himself, questioning if this boy really just did solve all his problems in 3 minutes flat, when his stomach growled. Toshinori was hungry for the first time in years. Deku, the kind boy, must have heard his stomach complain because the next second he was offering Toshinori a snack bar, and smiling that blinding smile again. Tashi was smiling too. The snack bar seemed to be the most delicious thing Tashi had ever eaten. He felt like laughing or crying, and he could take a deep breath to do either without blood getting stuck in his throat. And then an alarm in the air started blaring, and a doctor ran through the room shouting out orders. Alright people. There was just a villain attack on the south side bridge. The heroes already bagged the villain, but there are injured civilians out there, and they are requesting a field team. Mei, Benji, Cal, and Team 4 all gear up. We leave in 3. That's when the man noticed Deku. You too, Deku. We need you in the field if you are done with your patients. Yes sir. He is all set. But I never even checked him in. The man briefly sighed and motioned for the nurse from earlier to come over. Please take this man and check him in and then out again, thank you. He said to her and then turned back to Deku. Problem solved, now sweet up and let's move. Deku nodded as the man left. Sorry Mr. Yagi. I hope you have a great life. Susie will check you out and get your papers in order. Thank you Susie. No problem Deku. I suggest you follow up with your primary doctor, and I hope I never see you in my ear again. Goodbye. And with that, the boy bolted off with the kid sling over his shoulder. It was then that Tashi realized that he didn't even get the kid's real name. Deku was having a good day. This morning he had healed 24 people, including one that recovery girl sent to him. Mr. Yagi had been so happy eating that snack bar Izuku felt like he could fly. And now he got to go and help people who just went through a villain attack. Not that he was happy there were injured people out there, but Deku was extremely happy to be allowed to help. They were being briefed on the situation as they rode in the back of the ambulance. Apparently, a Rhino Quirk villain had tried to escape via running across the bridge and pushing all the vehicles out of his way as he went. They were going to be the first team on the scene, but the cops had been there for a while and had reported no fatal injuries. That was always good. But apparently, there was a bus full of people that needed attention, and that was where Deku and Mei were assigned. So the second the ambulance stopped, they were out and running. Of course, no one had told them the bus was a school bus that was halfway off the bridge held up by tree vines. So Kamui Woods must have been here, Deku thought as he and the surgeon Mei started to offload people through the back door. Deku proceeded to heal a head wound, and an arm, and a leg. At one point he caught a glimpse of the media swarmed around the hero's still one scene. Most heroes never helped with the cleanup. Kamui Woods was here, along with Death Arms. The third hero must have left to help escort the villain to jail. Or at least Deku hoped the third they had heard about was doing something productive. Deku loved heroes, but being first on the scene like this made him realize just how many heroes did not care beyond capturing the villain. That's why All Might was still his favorite. All Might always stayed behind to help clean up and take care of people, or at least he used to. Deku, like many other fans, had noticed a decline in activity recently, and he had been leaving crime scenes sooner and sooner. Deku was snapped out of his musings by a feeling of dread in the pit of his stomach. One of the remnants he picked up was called Sixth Sense, and it was a minor warning of danger. Needless to say, it was very useful in his line of work. Deku finished healing the cut he was working on, and turned to Mei to warn her just as one of the tree vines holding up the bus snapped. Everyone froze, wide-eyed, looking at the snapped vine. And then they started to panic. The remaining middle school students on the bus tried to all get out at the same time, and got stuck in the doorway, and their movements caused yet another vine to snap. "Don't move!" yelled Deku the same time Mei yelled. "Stop." But it was no use, the bus started to slowly slide forwards off the side of the bridge. Deku shot forwards to grab onto the bus and pull. Deku, thanks to his strength Quirk remnant, could lift a few hundred pounds, but he was doing little to stop the bus from moving forward off the side of the bridge. It was almost like a bad movie plot, with the bus slowly sliding off the cliff, except here it was a bridge, and there were wooden vines slowly snapping away. But between Deku and the vines, the bus had held for a few extra seconds the students needed to escape. Just in time too, as the biggest vine was about to snap. And then Deku heard it. A small sob from deep inside the bus, and he knew there was one more passenger. The final vine was cracking, and Mei was yelling for Deku to let go, but he couldn't. The vine cracked, and with a final screech of metal on metal, the bus started its free fall. Deku was dragged quickly forwards a good 5 feet, giving it his everything not to let the kid go down, demanding his body do more. And like the gods had heard his plea, a small bolt of green lightning crackled over Deku's skin, and he and the bus stopped. For a second Deku just watched the energy move on his legs and his hands where they connected to the bus, denting it. He hurt, but he then knew he could save the kid. So, ignoring the small snaps of pain on every step before his regeneration aided him, Deku started to back up. One step at a time Deku dragged the 30,000-pound bus with him, until the bus was pulled up over the side of the bridge and sat flat on the bridge. Deku dropped to the ground panting, his arms and legs still fixing themselves from the unknown remnant. His mind seemed slow to come back online, full of questions like, how? Who? When? And what was that sound? Deku opened his eyes. Oh, that sound was cheering. The crowd was cheering for him. Was the passenger okay? Deku needed to know. On shaky feet, he got up and stepped onto the bus. All the way at the front was one girl, sobbing that she could not move. And Deku could tell from how still her body was, and the huge shard of glass sticking out of her neck, that she had been paralyzed from the neck down. So with his last bit of energy, Deku reached down, attached his skin to hers, and healed his patient. SHHH. I think he's waking up. Deku blinked his eyes slowly, waking up to an ambulance ceiling. He looked over his shoulder to see an IV bag attached to him and groaned. He overdid it again. Fuck kid, you with us? His co-worker Mei asked, prodding his side. Not a kid, Deku mumbled. I'm 14. Kid or not, that was something. I mean, I thought for sure you were just going to go over the side with the bus, and you frickin' pulled it up. I've never seen anything like it. When did you get that ability, Deku? A second voice belonging to his field supervisor spoke then. Yeah, Squirt, been holding out on us, have you? If I knew you were that strong, I would have had you moving all the old equipment to the basement instead of hiring those third-party idiots to do it. Problem was that Deku didn't know when he got the new remnant. He had had every intention of going over the side with the bus if it came to it. Deku had already been planning to swim down to rescue the girl, and then it was like some unknown power source just activated. Most of the time Deku only got tiny portions of people's quirks, and even then only from healing someone many times or big wounds, but he could think of no one with a quirk on that scale that he had healed, that such a small fraction could do that. It was then a nagging thought about Mr. Yagi started to form in his head. What if no? Even if it was not his place? Deku dismissed the thought before it finished. He had more important questions right now anyway. Is everyone else okay? He asked. The girl on the bus, I can't remember. Mei snorted next to him and eyeballed their boss. Told you that would be the first thing he asked, she said. You now owe me free coffee for a week. She's fine, Deku. You've been out for about 20 minutes, but you healed her before you left us. Everyone else is fine too, no major injuries that you didn't already treat, unless you can turn back time too, and make it so I didn't lose both bets today. Deku was relieved that everyone was okay. You know it's rude to bet on people, but was what the first bet. I bet that you would not pass out on us today, but you apparently overdid it somehow, and now I also owe May lunch tomorrow. He frowns and May snickered. How many people did you heal this morning before coming here anyway? 2 dozen, sir. You and I both know you normally have much higher limits than that. What did you heal on them? Well, sir, it was only a few cancer patients, and a burn victim. I did regrow back this one man's stomach and lungs. Squirt, you should have told me if you were running on empty. But I wasn't. Deku cried. Really, I ate all my protein bars and I was good. But whatever that remnant was that helped me pull up the bus really drained me, sir. His boss looked at him skeptically for a minute, but saw no fault within Dika's eyes and sighed. He was about to scold the boy a bit more for passing out and pushing himself when the doors to the ambulance opened, and another one of the surgery field team poked his head in. I'm sorry, boss, but the cops want another chat with you. And the media is still demanding to Deku. I've been telling them no, but Deku. A reporter tried to push her way into the doorway holding a microphone, cameraman behind her. Please tell us. Luckily Deku's supervisor had a quirk that allowed him to silence people for 30 seconds. He always said it was thanks to his quirk that he lived through babysitting the air daily, and once the reporter noticed she could not speak, she was easily pushed out of the way again. The third co-worker climbed into the back and sighed. Thank boss, gotta love your quirk. He said we should probably get out of here as soon as you talk to the cops again. They seemed to be willing to let Deku hear off on the technicality, but with the media going nuts out there was talk about taking Deku down to the station. Not on my watch. You stay here. No one takes any of my field crew when I'm in charge. And their boss opened the door, jumped out of the ambulance, leaving a very confused Deku behind. Guys, what's happening? He asked. His co-workers glanced at each other and then back to Deku. Nothing to worry about, kid. It's just that the media kind of thought you were a vigilante or something. I mean, you did pull a frickin' huge bus up the side of the bridge with your bare hands. And that fancy little medical pass that allows you to use your quirk really is only for healing quirks. Oh yeah, Deku knew that the pass was only given to people with healing quirks or such. It took him almost 2 years of classes to get his, and it normally took people 4 years to pass. It would have been terrible to get it taken away now. But as we have been explaining to the cops, it technically says you can use your quirk when surprised in the field to help and aid injured civilians. And since you did just that, the cops are unsure how to proceed. I mean, at the start they weren't convinced you even had a healing quirk, but then they saw the footage of you in the bus pulling out the shard in that girl's neck and wrapping your skin around her, and they filmed that. Deku shouted and the ambulance went quiet. They filmed everything, kid. From right as the bus started to go down to you pulling it up and entering it to heal that passenger. They even got May yelling at you to let go. But don't worry. We all call you Deku, and none of them know your real name. Deku's first thought was, thank God, no one knows my name. It didn't take long for such a powerful healing quirk to gain reputation, and Deku had to take out a few restraining orders when he was younger before he started using a pen name, but his second thought was, oh, crap, mom. And lighting fast he whipped out his phone. 7 missed calls. As quick as he could, Deku texted his mom. I'm okay, new remnant, he wrote. I will call you as soon as I get back to the hospital. The response was instant. I will be waiting for you there, stay safe. I wish I had a mother that cared that much about me, muttered his co-worker that was looking over his shoulder. This just made Deku eat and blush a bit, explaining how his mom was the best. Although, she would probably have some choice words for him after his co-workers and boss finished their speeches, and after the cops let him go, and after the media lost interest. Deku sighed. It was going to be a long day, and it had started off so well too. Considering he never saw a real doctor, Toshinori was surprised by just how much paperwork was involved to get out of the hospital. At first, he had just tried to leave. He had wanted to help with whatever emergency the kid Deku and the other surgeons had been dispatched to. However, the one nurse dressed in pink was surprisingly forceful about him filling out and signing all his paperwork. Luckily she let him do the paperwork in the hospital cafeteria because gods above was he hungry. It may have been hospital cafeteria food, but Tashi still ate so much of it that he made the cooks behind the counter start to glare at him as he went up for 5 THS, 6 THS. It was so nice to be able to eat whatever he wanted and enjoy it. Gosh, it was so nice to take a breath without choking on blood. It was so nice not to hurt. Tashi wanted to thank that boy from the bottom of his heart. Maybe the kid would even make a good successor. Tashi had been called impulsive before, but something just told him this boy would be perfect. Sadly, no matter how hard Toshinori tried, the nurse would not give him the boy's real name. Or where he lived, or what days he volunteered, nothing. She also made him sign an NDA, stating he would not discuss Deku or his quirk with anyone besides his primary doctor or family members that would notice a difference in his health. Even then, the list on what he was allowed to disclose was surprisingly small. The nurse explained that the hospital took Deku's protection very seriously. She told Tashi about how when Deku had first started volunteering, he had started at another hospital, and had not only used his real name, but also posted online that he could cure anything. Not only was the hospital swamped with more people than Deku could heal every day, but many people became stalkers to the poor boy. Apparently, the kid had to pursue legal action against some of his more persistent followers, and had to change where he volunteered and go by a cover name. Toshinori understood the boy's safety was important, but Tashi was not one of those crazy people they were protecting the kid from. All Tashi wanted to do was find out his real name, track him down, thank him from the bottom of his heart, buy him ice cream, bring him to UA, get him accepted, make him a hero, and possibly give him his quirk and his mantle. Okay. So maybe Tashi was sounding a bit crazy. It must be all the oxygen he was getting now. Finally, after more paperwork than Tashi had to fill out after capturing a villain, he was free. Finding a safe place to change to his buff form, Tashi quickly took off his civilian clothes, and took a great leap to the rooftops. If being healed in his normal form felt good, being healed now felt like flying. All Might ran all the way to the bridge the boy had gone to earlier, but when he got there even the cleanup had been completed, and traffic had started to cross the bridge again. Oh well. Just as All Might was considering going directly to Recovery Girl with the good news, his police scanner on his cell phone alerted him to a bank robbery in progress. All Might grinned and leaped away. It was near dark out by the time Toshinori finally made his way through the UA gates to see Recovery Girl. He should have felt bad that he had not immediately gone to see her, and thank her for sending her to Deku, but for once his smile persisted even in his civilian form. He had been All Might for 6 hours straight. He had only planned to help with the bank robbery, but then there was another villain downtown, and a car crash she helped with, and before Tashi had realized the sun was starting to set, and he still felt like he could go for days. It had been so long since he felt whole that he had almost forgotten what being healthy felt like. Toshinori took one leap to clear all the stairs to the second floor, and rounded a corner to finally knock on Recovery Girl's door. He could hear Chio on the other side. "Oh Toshinori, is it you? Come in, come in. No need to knock," she said as Tashi pushed open the door. When he entered she had her back turned towards him, putting new bedding on a cot. "If you're here to apologize for not going on that appointment I set up for you, I had a feeling you would talk yourself out of it, and I would be happy to eek." It was then that she finally turned around, and for a second Tashi knew that his good friend had not recognized him, either because she jumped and looked surprised for a moment before looking very confused. "Tashi. What happened to you?" Tashi grinned wide. "I went to the appointment, Chio." "You went to the appointment? You mean the appointment I scheduled for you today?" "Yes." Tashi answered, still grinning. "You were right. The healer there was a miracle worker. Gosh Chio, you should have seen this kid." And with that Tashi started to explain his entire encounter with Deku, from meeting him at the door, to the mob walking in together, all the way to the kid explaining his quirk and finally healing him. "It was amazing Chio, he like fused his skin to mine, and I could feel things moving inside of me. But nothing hurt. And then 3 minutes later I was healed." All throughout the story, Tashi could tell Recovery Girl was skeptical. She asked questions about the kid's age. "I'm not sure, maybe 12, 13. He acted older, but he was still a bit short." And she asked questions about his quirk. "I only remember what I already told you. I was so excited to get started." "No, don't look at me that way Chio." This boy took one look at my wounds and didn't even blink. Just went, "Hey, I've healed worse." And the nurse after was not helpful either. And finally, Chio asked how Tashi felt. He felt great. He told her as much. Told her how he could breathe and eat, and how he had spent the whole afternoon in his buff form with no problem. It was then Recovery Girl started to run some tests. And oh, did she run a lot of tests. She took his blood, did an ultrasound, x-rays, even did something with his spit. When she was finally done Chio was just standing there shocked looking over the test results. "I can't believe it," she exclaimed, "you're fine." Tashi tried to reach for the test results. "I told you that already." "Hush boy," Recovery Girl said, swatting his hand away. "I mean to say that, besides you is still a bit underweight, you seem to be back at your prime." "What?" Tashi asked confused. Chio motioned for him to come over to the x-rays she had up. "Tashi, look at this. These are your ribs, your body. You and I both know these ribs have been broken dozens of times, and even when a bone heals, I should be able to see it here, but there is nothing. Not a blemish. It's like this everywhere." Chio continued shaking her head in disbelief, "And not only that, but your bones are more than twice as dense as the last time I saw you, and your body seems to be in top shape. If I didn't know any better I would say I was looking at someone half your age. And you're saying some boy did this?" Tashi was amazed. He knew he had felt healed, but he had not realized that he was on the inside as good as he felt on the outside. He was a bit confused as to why Chio was surprised though. After all, she sent him to Deku, right? "I'm sorry Chio, but didn't you expect me to be healed by Deku? You were the one who sent me to him. I didn't expect him to heal you this much. I thought maybe give you an hour of time back." She sighed and shook her head. "I never expected him to get you back, not only the hour, but a lifetime. I've never seen anything like this." I mean, lots of hospitals advertise they have the best healers in the world, but if I had thought for a second any of them were right, Chio trailed off, then still looking for imperfection in the x-rays. If I had known sooner, I would have gotten you fixed sooner. Well, I guess for once one hospital did actually advertise the best healer in the world. But Chio frowned and shook her head. You don't understand, my boy, they didn't advertise it. It was just a rumor. That would make sense. Tashi knew firsthand how careful the hospital was on relieving too much about their healer. But then, why did you send me there if Deku was just a rumor? I don't understand, how did you know? Chio smiled and handed him a candy. I actually sent you there because the hospital was so adamant to deny Deku the healer work there. As I said, every other hospital sings praises about their healers, but this one was strangely silent, with a strangely high amount of one-day turnarounds on serious wounds. It took me weeks to convince someone to talk to me about Deku, and even then they were very hush-hush about it. Tashi nodded. That made sense. Chio continued to talk. But now I understand just why the hospital was so secretive. Tashi, I will repeat. This level of healing is like nothing I've ever seen. It has effectively added decades onto your lifespan, and I would dare say you are healthier now than before. Well, you know, dear. If this boy was to fall into the wrong lifestyle, heaven forbid if villains got a hold of him, I would never let that happen. Tashi spoke up quickly. This kid Chio, he was the sweetest, kindest person I think I have ever met. All he wanted to do was help people, and he was good at it. Chio smiled and chuffed a bit at his comment, then stood straight and looked Tashi in the eye. I'll fight you for him, she said. What? You have been looking for a successor for more than a year now, and I've not seen you get this attached to anyone yet. Even though now I think you could go years without needing one, I can still read your thoughts on your face, boy. But this kid is a healer and I want to retire someday, so I repeat. I will fight you for him. Chio bent down as far as she could go into a fighting stance, and wielded a lollipop as a weapon, pointing it towards Tashi. He honestly did not know if she was joking or not, but luckily he was saved by Nezu opening the door and walking in. Truthfully, Tashi was hoping Nezu would be as surprised as Chio at his transformation, but the principle of UA was harder to ruffle than that. Greetings, Nezu said, and congratulations Tashi on your recovery. I knew Deku was good, but you look so different. The UA security system flagged you on the way in as imposter. Ha. Wait, Nezu, you know about Deku? I do. The small rodent-like creature says. Any kid that earns a medical degree before he enters high school comes up on my radar. A medical degree? But the kid said he wasn't a doctor. MMMH. Not yet. The kid still has about 2 years worth of work on his degree, but considering how smart he is, I expect he will have it done by he enrolls here. He's coming to UA. Both Chio and Tashi asked, sounding more excited than Nezu had seen either in a long while. Yes, he is and will be applying to the hero program next year. I honestly was dying to see how he would beat our entrance exam, but in light of recent events, I might think I will have to let him in on recommendation before another school poaches him out from under us. Recent events? You mean him healing me? Tashi asked. It was then Tashi noticed Nezu grin deviously and pull out a laptop. Where had he been keeping that? There's something you both need to see. And so Chio and Tashi watched the boy Deku pull an entire bus up from the abyss, using what did indeed look like Ofa, before healing the last passenger and passing out. The clip ended and Tashi felt a strange amount of pride in the boy, before Chio yelled in his ear. Tashi, what did you do? It has taken all of Izuku's puppy dog eyes talent to get his mother to allow him back at the hospital the next day. He has spent the afternoon and night after the bus incident either being yelled at for his recklessness or sleeping off his quirk exhaustion. He had barely even had the time to even think more on his new remnant, and its origins like he wanted to. But no matter, Izuku knew he wanted to be at the hospital healing people whenever he could. He just did not expect this many people to have tracked him down. It made sense really, the live broadcast had shown the name of the hospital on the side of the ambulance, but this was a bit ridiculous. Hundreds of people swarmed around the hospital, demanding to be let in and demanding to see Deku. Some wanted to be healed, some were reporters, but most just seemed to be hero fans who just wanted an autograph. It was lucky they had been expecting this, because if he had not been snuck into the back entrance, he would have walked right into the chaos. Not that the air was any less hectic. Even with some of the nurses acting as bouncers, people looking for Deku the hero kid poured through the doors. Deku finally decided to go heal people on the upper floors, after the 5th person who got in with chest pains asked for an autograph. There was a ton of transfers from other hospitals, his fault. So there were plenty of people for him to heal. Although, his mumbling was probably freaking out a few patients, but there was just too much on Deku's mind. Like, what exactly was his new remnant? And maybe more importantly, where had it come from? Izuku only got a small portion of someone's quirk when he healed them, and usually only if he had either healed them many times or for a major injury. Deku could burp small bits of fire, and see in partial darkness, and most of his remnants were completely useless. But this remnant. It was like pure power that Izuku had never felt before. It was Deku was broken out of his thoughts by 2 passing nurses. No, really. This kid was going nuts. He blew up 3 chairs insisting he knew Deku personally. I heard he was already escorted out this morning. Who on earth let him back in with that foul mouth of his? I've never heard a kid swear more, I tell you. Izuku had stopped dead in his tracks. Could it be? Quickly he stopped the nurses. Excuse me, he asked. Oh, Deku. I'm sorry, sweetie, I didn't see you there, said the first nurse. Why are you on this floor? Oh, there were too many people downstairs. Ugh. I know, the second nurse said. And they are rude too. We were just talking about this one kid who is down there literally blowing up the place. That's what I wanted to ask you about. This kid, did he have blonde hair and an explosion quirk? The nurse stood a little straighter and cautiously looked Deku in the eyes. Yes, she answered. Red eyes with a bad temper? Deku asked, feeling excited. Yes, the nurse answered again, sounding more like a question. She was confused. Deku could tell, but he no longer cared. Before they could even get out another word, Deku was already dashing away at top speed. Maybe it was fate or luck, but Bakugo Katsuki had been watching the news when the exclusive came on, interviewing a few heroes after the villain fight on the bridge. Normally after the epic fighting was over, Katsuki turned off the dumb show, but his luck would have he had watched just long enough to see his fucking childhood friend lift a bus to save one kid. Fucking typical. How the little nerd had wormed his way onto a medical team was beyond Katsuki. You needed a stupid medical Quirk license for that, and to get one you needed a fucking college degree. Somehow the nerd must have skipped middle and high school and gone straight on to college. The fucker. But as Katsuki had come to this conclusion, he became irrationally angry, his default setting. How dare Deku just skip over his high school education like that? The nerd had promised to be his rival at UA. Deku would not just skip UA like that, would he? It was all they ever talked about as dumb kids. Surely the nerd didn't think he would be good enough before UA, right? But then again, it had been years. Their mothers had had a huge falling out, leading to Izuku and Inko moving away without leaving an address or phone number, and a lot had changed. Katsuki had watched the damn nerd had lifted a fucking bus, for heaven's sake. Who had he healed to get that power? He suddenly felt an irrational ping of jealousy, but quickly squashed it down. That was not important right now. Katsuki already had had a bone to pick with Deku, but now he was right out mad, and it was time to talk some sense into the nerd. He had been kicked out 3 fucking times. Once last night when Katsuki had arrived after the live broadcast, and twice this morning. All these stupid extras around making it impossible to see Deku. And now they were fucking kicking him out again. He was just about to be dragged out the door by a surprisingly strong nurse when he heard it. Kakin. And then a second later he felt it, in the form of a bear bunny. Hugging a mop of green hair in his face. And to his surprise, Katsuki almost hugged back. Almost. Instead, once he had regained his footing, Katsuki pushed the nerd off of him and growled. He was mad at this nerd. Mad that he was volunteering at this shitty place and mad that he had never reached out. It was Inko that moved and changed phone numbers, not the Bakugas. What the fuck, nerd? Katsuki spat, and by some miracle, Deku knew exactly what he meant. How just simple eye contact and 4 words could convey everything, well, he had no fucking clue, but as his only friend and rival, Deku was damn good at understanding him. Apparently even after years apart. But there were also a ton of people around, including the now confused nurse that was about to drag Katsuki out of the building. I'm sorry, Kakin. Deku's voice broke and Katsuki felt a second of guilt, but we can't talk here, come follow me. And with that, Katsuki felt his hand being grabbed and his arm being tugged, and next thing that he knew he was being fucking pulled into an elevator. Katsuki would have probably blown up right there if there hadn't been other people in the elevator with him. Eventually, they found their way to a nice office labeled Deku. Healer and Katsuki almost did rightfully blow up then and there, but Deku broke down first. I'm so sorry, Kakin. Deku almost sobbed in front of Katsuki. My mom wouldn't let me talk to you. And then we moved so far away and she thought you were too reckless, and made me promise not to seek you out if I wanted to go to college to be able to volunteer here with my quirk. And I've helped so many people, Kakin. You gotta understand. You promised your mom fucking what? As she said I could go to college if I stayed away from you and stopped being reckless. As she thought you were a bad influence, please understand I had to. Something Katsuki refused to call hurt settled in his stupid gut. Over the past few fucking years, he had thought up of so many reasons why the damn nerd never came and found him, but he had never considered he had picked stupid books and asswipe volunteer work over him. The fuck, I understand. I understand you fucking curled up and died. What in the hell is this crap? Katsuki gestured wildly to the room. It's my office, Kakin. It's. No, it isn't. Katsuki roared. It's a cough out. Fucking asswipe. Do you think you're too good to go to school like normal kids, is that it? You're too good to wait to use your fucking quirk. You think you can just trade your friend for a fucking office with a view. You think you deserve this, fuck this. Fuck you. Fuck. But he was cut off by a book being shoved into his face by a crying Deku. It was one of those fucking notebooks the nerd used to keep when they were kids. He was just about to snarl and blast the damn notebook when he caught the title of the notebook written in Deku's handwriting. It read, People Healed. And maybe it was out of fucking curiosity, but Katsuki snagged the book out of the nerd's hand and opened it. He had expected a list of names and sappy pages full of text, describing how nice people were and their illnesses. Instead, Katsuki found himself looking at nothing but tally marks. Pages and pages of them. In fact, the whole darn book was full of them right down to the last page. Katsuki flipped the back cover shut, only to see even the back was covered in small marks. It was then Katsuki decided to look up, only to see a wide eye at Deku holding 3 more notebooks. 132,765. Deku declared through his tears, definitely that's how many people I've healed. More than a third of those would be dead today if I hadn't. I didn't cough out and I didn't trade you for an office with a view. I did my job as a future hero and I saved people. Katsuki was rarely speechless. But somewhere in the book of tally marks his rage had simmered down to a low burn, and he was a bit relieved and a lot amazed. Some part of him had known that Deku was the only other person as amazing as him, but wow. So he just let out a long stunned sounding, fuck, yeah. I know. Deku spoke softly as he took back the notebook to put it back onto his shelf. It went silent after that for a few moments. Not quite an awkward silence, but not a comfortable one either. You get it now, right Kakin? Deku asked, not meeting his eyes. I just had to, but I still plan on I was never not going to see you again. I miss you so much Kakin, you know. Please say you get it. Yeah, I fucking get it, nerd. But I'm still gonna cream you at UA. Of course Kakin. I promised you I would see you there and you know I never break my promises. Deku smiled bright and sunny at him, and despite the drying tears on his cheeks, Katsuki was whacked with a wave of nostalgia that hit him hard. Katsuki would never say it out loud, but after Deku left he never found any extras worthy of being called a friend, and he fucking missed the nerd. God, he really missed him. TCH. Katsuki scoffed. Well, I wouldn't make it fucking easy on you, you know. Not with the secret weapon you gave me. Huh? What do you mean Kakin? What did I give you? The fuck you don't know, Katsuki replied, but as Deku looked at him with a puzzled expression, Katsuki realized that Deku really did not know. Typical again. Katsuki sighed angrily. Okay you damn nerd, watch this. Katsuki then grabbed a sharpened pencil off the desk, held up his hand, and violently stabbed himself. The stupid pencil went clean through his hand, and while it fucking hurt for a split second, Katsuki was getting too much joy from the look of panic on Deku's face to notice. Ah. The nerd wailed, why did you do that? Let me see right now. But Katsuki pulled away from the nerd's reach. No way dork. I said fucking watch, so watch. And with that Katsuki pulled the pencil out of his hand, making Deku panic more. Then, right on cue, without Deku's intervention, the hole in his hand started to heal itself. It was a bit slower than what Deku could do even as children, but in a handful of seconds his hand had repaired itself completely, not even a scar left. Katsuki stood smugly looking at a shocked and mumbling Izuku. Is that possible? The remnant goes both ways. But why have I never? What if Kakin was the one I healed the most, and probably still is? Will this affect? Yo? Earth to nerd. Katsuki yelled. Same old fucking creepy nerd. At least now he looked sheepish after being called out on him mumbling. Oh? Hi. Sorry Kakin. I just can't believe this. I always knew I got a piece of the quirk of the people that I healed, but I never thought to test if it went both ways. When did you find out? Katsuki grumbled a bit but got to explaining. It wasn't even a week after you fucking left, I broke my stupid leg training. If you had been there you would have healed it too quickly to notice, but before my mom could fucking get me to the hospital was already walking on it again. How long did it take to heal? About 3 stupid hours that first time. But I've been training with it ever since. Still can't do that creepy skin fusing skin to regenerate other people, but last month I blew off my arm, and it grew back in 10 minutes flat. Why did you blow off your arm Kakin? Wait. You've been training with my quirk. TCH. You dumbass, haven't you been fucking training with mine? And the way the fucking nerd looked at his shoes and started to stutter said it all. Katsuki could feel himself growing angry again. His quirk was the fucking best one, and Deku fucking just tried to forget about it. Deku could probably sense his rage, because the nerd started to speak again. Well Kakin, you didn't seem to like it when I used your quirk when we were kids, so I just kind of haven't said it since you fight. The last part came out all in one piece, and it was only thanks to Katsuki's knowledge of Deku's speak that he could understand. Ah. Their stupid fucking childhood fight. Katsuki had been grounded for a whole year and forbidden from seeing Deku. And all because Katsuki never said fucking thank you. It was a stupid phrase, and Katsuki never saw the point. He still didn't. Deku would heal a murderer on death row if he thought for a second the person was in pain. Why should Katsuki thank him for something he would do for anyone? Something to dwell on later though, when the nerd wasn't wasting his quirk. What kind of ass excuse is that? Fuck. I thought you would have discovered all new ways to use explosion by now. Now I'm just going to have to show you how it's done. Deku perked up at this. Are you offering to teach me Kakin? He asked. Damn right. If you are going to use explosion you are going to fucking use it right. Thank you Kakin. Deku was practically buzzing with excitement now. But we can't do it at my place. We can't fucking train at mine either. The beach. Deku suddenly yelled. Fucking what? That beach that we used to pass on our way to school. We could train there. Hey, nerd, have you been to that beach recently? No. Since you moved away it's turned into a big fucking shit pile of trash. Everyone in town uses like a dump. Kaken, that's terrible. Like fuck I should care. We should clean it. What the fuck, no. Kasuki replied. There was no fucking way in hell he was going to clean a shithole beach. That is. Until Deku started to sniffle again. Fuck. Did Deku get a brainwashing remnant or something? At least it would be good weight training. Fuck. Izuku was enjoying his day at the trash beach. It had been 3 days since Kaken had found Izuku at the hospital, and they had agreed to train together and clean up the beach. It had also been 3 days since Izuku had been allowed to go back to the hospital. After the first day, the people in charge decided to ban Deku from volunteering until the buzz around the whole thing died down a bit. And while it was totally unfair he wasn't allowed to heal anyone for a few days, it did give Izuku the time to train with Kaken, and the much needed time to analyze the new developments with his quirk. There was so much going on with his quirk that he had actually decided to start a new notebook, and had arrived an hour early to the beach to work on it while sitting on a trash heap, and waiting for Kaken to show up. Izuku started with transferring over some of the basics about his quirk. How long it took to heal various parts of his own boy, how long it took to heal others, accounts of each landmark point he has hit with his quirk, how many calories and so on. But after the basics things got a little difficult to explain. Izuku had always thought a small part of the injured person's DNA somehow stayed with him after he disconnected his skin, and that part was roughly equal to the number of times Deku had healed the person, or severity of the wounds. Most of the time to get any kind of remnant at all, he either had to heal the person more than once or a huge amount all at once, but even then there were a few stacking quirks that were very common. There were a lot of very common quirks such as minor strength enhancements that seemed to stack, and Deku's strength got stronger with each strength quirk user he healed. The first strength user he had ever healed was his material arts teacher. Deku had gone a different route back home, thanks to his sixth sense quirk, and as a result, was there just in time to see a man trip on some stairs and fall on hard on his tailbone. Deku healed the man and has received free lessons at the dojo ever since. It's still a running joke at the dojo though, all the kids giggle about the time the teacher broke his butt and got down by some stairs. However, nothing seems to stack quite like this new remnant did. Izuku had taken to calling it third power because it was like an endless pool of power that seemed to stack beyond his capabilities, and with whatever remnant he was using. Like if he is using his strength remnant, it makes him stronger, much stronger. However, not all of his remnants were affected the same. Izuku took note in his new journal of his findings of his strongest remnants. Strength easily lifted weight without normal remnant tripled more. Ran out of weights at the dojo to test what. Max weight unknown, but after a certain point the third power kicks in, and it pushes so much power around that regenerate. Has a hard time keeping up with the damage done. Can tire out quickly, can lift 100 times weight. See page 14 for the bus incident. Creation still cannot make anything larger than a few ounces of mass, but it seems with third power, the time to create anything is reduces by almost 70%. Still very draining, and very hard to use. Portals, well before the largest portal possible was only about an inch in diameter, and only within a 10 feet radius. Third power increases the size big enough to get a punch through, and has nearly tripled the radius. Still has about a 10-second cooldown. Possible send punches through. Note. Train, and test potential portal growth. Explosion surprisingly not as affected by third power. Explosion blast radius 12% larger and cooldown time reduces by 22%. Explosion was just over half of Kaken's power level before our fight, but today needs work. Have been training with Kaken daily, and power levels are improving. Fire, thanks to third power it is now possible to create a palm-sized flam, and toss it away from my body. Ice still cannot freeze much more than a few ice packs, but the temperature has lowered, and if it can be lowered more it could be useful. Note. See page 9 for training program. Electricity, well before it could only just recharge a battery, now with third power and with more practice, it could probably be used to revive someone's heart, or knock someone out like a taser. More practice needed before it is safe to use though. Note. See page 9. Increased senses, while most of the increased sense remnants in the past have remained unuseful, with third power most of my senses can be dialed up to about 3 times the normal human. Further than that is not recommended. See page 6 for the nosebleed of death. Telekinesis, minor telekinesis like Mother's Quirk is common, and now with third power, this remnant can move about 10 pounds, and can move items nearly 80% faster. Enhance, I can make people around me go just a bit faster, or longer, or make their quirks work a bit more. Worked before in a 30-foot range, on a max of 3 people, and only made them a tiny bit better untested with third power. Sixth sense being a tricky quirk to measure in the first place, it is impossible to tell yet if third power changed it at all when active. Perfect balance, one of the few remnants that seems to work mostly passively. Deku trailed off his writing there as he thought more about perfect balance and its owner. Perfect balance was arguably Deku's strongest quirk when compared to the original user. The original user was a college student that was also a pro parkour artist. His core perfect balance allowed him to pull off impossible moves, but did nothing to improve his normal human strength and squishiness, so he had ended up in the air a few times a month, for as long as Deku could recall. That is, up until recently. Originally Deku had just though the man had moved away or just got smarter about the jumps he took, but after Kakin's big reveal, Deku had gotten in touch. Apparently, it was not a one-time deal. John the Parker artist also now heals broken bones in minutes. Deku had talked to John and found out that about after the 20th visit to the air with Deku healing him, he reported he never got sick, and after another 2 years of steady visits, he found out he had gained some regeneration, and figured out how to use it to heal himself. In John's story though, Deku found an explanation as to why no one had ever reported back to him with increased healing before. Not only did Deku have to heal the same person more than a dozen times to see a noticeable change, but both Kakin and John reported they had to train the Quirk to get it to work significantly. Simply put, there was a very few number of people that Deku had healed enough, and even a fewer number of those that would think to try and activate, by severely breaking or injuring themselves and train a new unexpected Quirk. It also settled Izuku's mind a bit to know that the power transfer seemed to work evenly and fit into his already discovered about 1 to 2% remnant gain per broken bone or other medium-sized injuries. And up to 20% at a time for serious regenerations, like regrowing a lost limb or two. But then it had risen the question, where had third power come from? At first, Izuku went through all his old case files looking for anyone with a quirk that enhanced other quirks. There were few and far between, and none of them he had healed in major ways, and none strong enough to be third power. Izuku also thought he would have noticed if he had had third power long. Izuku probably would have also noticed someone as powerful as third power's original owner walking into the air. If there were no outside forces at work, then Deku would have only received a small portion of the quirk, and if a small portion of it could lift buses, the original quirk must be impossibly strong. It only took about a day of thinking and research for Deku to figure it out. Or well recall what his mind had already pieced together in the background. To be fair, Deku was smart even before the few minor intelligence remnants he acquired, and there were precious few people in the world strong enough to be the one Deku was looking for. Deku had theorized he must have healed All Might pretty quickly, and then it didn't take too long to take a closer look at Mr. Yagi. Since the start, Deku had had a nagging feeling about Mr. Yagi. Maybe it was sixth sense, maybe it was Deku's brain subconsciously trying to tell him something, but the more he researched, the more there was no doubt in his mind that All Might was Yagi Tashinori. It made perfect sense. Mr. Yagi even worked with All Might officially, and it would be the perfect cover, but Izuku could not find a single image of them together. Then, of course, it explains why fans never discovered his identity, and why All Might had been doing less and less over the last few years. Anyone would do less if they were missing a few internal organs. It was this revelation of All Might and missing a few organs that had troubled Deku for the last 2 days. First, Izuku had freaked out that somehow All Might had been injured, and there was someone out there powerful enough to injure him. Then it was the sadness that Mr. Yagi must have felt so alone not being able to tell people. Next, it was excitement. He had healed All Might. His idol was not only safe, but able to be at his best again, and he did that. Izuku had been so excited the day before that Kakin had made fun of him. But today came a final feeling. Doubt and a good helping of anxiety. Should he tell All Might he knows his identity? Should he tell him about his remnant? Mr. Yagi was given papers explaining it when he had been discharged, and no one could have missed the bus incident on the news, right? But then again, Deku didn't really explain his quirk very well to Mr. Yagi, because he was written down as quirkless. Would All Might be mad at Izuku for having even a part of his quirk? Would All Might have some healing powers now too? Would Izuku get in trouble? He didn't know. Bakugo Katsuki arrived at the beach to find his stupid-ass childhood friend sitting on a trash heap, muttering up a fucking storm, and scribbling away in a notebook. When they were kids, Katsuki thought it was creepy, and no, it was still creepy as hell. The nerd was mumbling about quirks and remnants and something about All Might. Ugh no. Katsuki was going to put a fucking stop to this nonsense. Hey. Nerd. Nothing. Boy. Deku. I'm talking here. Not even a glance. Growing angry, Katsuki let off a few large explosions from his hand and growled, and that at least got the stupid nerd to look up at him, and not the stupid book, but he was still muttering. But if it's possible, but then All Might, oh Kakin's here, Kakin is looking me, Deku muttered away, eyes less foggy, but still unfocused on the world around him. Katsuki was over this. Getting right up and close, he was about to blast Deku right in the face when Kakin has pretty eyes, and Katsuki froze to the spot. Fuck. Katsuki could feel heat rising to his cheeks. Feelings. Why did Deku have to give him fucking feelings? Yesterday this happened when Deku fucking smiled at him, and now he was saying Katsuki had pretty eyes. Who gave him the right? And when had he gotten so close? Deku staring up at him all innocent and fuck no. Boom. It took 10 seconds for the dust to settle, and for Deku's face to heal, but it was just enough time for Katsuki to get his blushing, mildly, under control. Oh Kakin. Would you have to blow me up? The nerd whined. He didn't care though, Katsuki knew as much, but the nerd didn't even fucking remember what he said, did he? typical. Oh, so typical. Ever since Katsuki found his friend again, it was like his stupid brain decided to like the nerd, and the nerd was not helping. TCH. Katsuki started putting on his scowl. You were on fucking Mars or something, nerd. Muttering up a storm and being a creepy ass fuck. I only did my civic duty by fucking snapping you out of it. And Deku fucking smiled at that. Katsuki may have flinched. Oh, thank you, Kakin. He said, taking his notebook and storing it safely in his bag. I probably should not be muttering about the stuff I was thinking about anyways. You got that right, nerd, Katsuki thought as Deku spoke more. Anyways. Did you want to start today with cleaning or get back to sparring? Katsuki thought back to yesterday when they had finally cleaned a big enough area to practice and train. Apparently, the nerd had taken a ton of lessons, but so had Katsuki, and was almost better at hand-to-hand than he fucking was. Katsuki still had the upper hand through being a few inches taller, but it did not stop Deku from pinning Katsuki down with a damn cheap move at the end of the match, and just sitting there smiling down at him. He had been stunned and then felt his cheeks heat as his fucking only friend looked down at him, and that was when Katsuki had felt his gross body respond to the situation. Katsuki had, of course, been mortified and retaliated by blowing Deku sky high, before the nerd could even realize what had happened. The moment had come to him in his dreams last night, and had had a highly different ending, but he sure as fucks was not going to spar so soon again. Not until he could look at his friend without his mind thinking about his first dirty dream he had had. I'm going to go clean, Katsuki said slowly and pointed to a far away over there. Okay, Kakin. And like the lost puppy he was, Deku started to follow him. Alone, Katsuki said in a threatening growl. Had to keep Deku damn far away for a while. At least until Kakin has pretty eyes stopped replaying in his head. But, alone. Kakin, fucking piss off Deku. Katsuki could not take the puppy dog eyes. He could fucking not. So he just stormed off in a huff, adding in some explosions for effect, and started cleaning farther up the fucking beach. Then he had to move behind a trash heap because he could feel Deku staring at him, and not in the way Katsuki would have liked either. Not to say Katsuki wanted the nerd to look at him at all, nope. But the nerd had to write. Kakin has pretty eyes, yes he must. Not that Katsuki could blame him, he was fit after all, a prime fucking specimen of the male human species. Over that last few years, he had grown into his looks and body. Sadly though, the little traitorous voice in Katsuka's head whispered, but so has Deku. And fuck had Katsuki really tried not to notice. Deku was his fucking childhood friend, and 3 days ago their friendship seemed to just magically pick up from where they left off. Katsuki was still damn right mad about Izuku leaving him for years, but it was hard to be at his angriest when Deku looked like that. But damn did the nerd look good. Not only did the stupid nerd have strong arms and abs to match Katsuka's own, but Deku also still had a soft face and an almost feminine herbless shape, and those legs Katsuki was pretty sure Deku could crush a fucking watermelon in them. He had seen someone online do it once for a YouTube video, and now his damn mind kept imaging Deku doing it, and for some reason that was hot. It was then Katsuki realized he was fucking blushing again from his train of thought. He was fucking screwed. The sun had just started to set over the trash-covered beach when Izuku and Kakani had finally called it a day. They had spent hours just picking up trash, sorting out the recycling, and just generally moving stuff to a truck manned by a local junkyard guy that was happy to take the scrap metal. They had also sparred for quite some time, once Kakin had gotten over whatever Deku had done to make him angry. Honestly, Izuku could not figure Kakin out sometimes. They would spar for 2 or 3 rounds, and then out of nowhere Kakin would lose focus, and then Deku would get the upper hand, and then Kakin would get really mad and just blow Deku up. It was interesting, and Izuku would be devoting more attention to it right now, if he didn't find who was sitting on a nearby roof more interesting. At first, it was just sixth sense nagging at him that he was being watched, but thanks to a few remnants and third power Izuku's hearing was just enough. He could hear 2 people whispering in hushed voices up on a nearby rooftop that was just a few stories tall and overlooked the beach. One of them was Mr. Yagi, and the other had been addressed as Nezu, so Izuku knew it had to be the principal of UA. And they had been watching almost all day. At first, Izuku had wanted to go to them, make it known that he could hear them, and confess he knew All Might's secret, and now had part of his quirk, and then ask for an autograph. But then he had gone and picked up a part of a car left on the beach, and that's when the hushed conversation got really interesting. Deku had been right. Mr. Yagi was All Might. What he did not know was that Nezu knew, and that third power was apparently called One for All. Deku listened as he worked, doing his best not to look up at the building, slowly drifting closer to the ground floor wanting to hear more. But some things did not seem to make sense at all. It was obvious that they had read the paperwork about Deku getting remnants from people's quirks. However, by the way they were talking, it sounded almost normal for One for All to be transferred around. There were also mentions of something or someone called All for One. By the way, it was used in conversation. Deku got the feeling it was a person, along with maybe a quirk name. However or whatever it was, Nezu and All Might compared his own quirk to it and One for All several times. It was somewhere in those conversations that Izuku realized that they were trying to figure out how much they could trust Izuku with, and what he needed to know. It was then that the thrill of listening and sneakily wore off, and Deku began to feel guilty for eavesdropping. Deku tried to reason with himself that All Might and Nezu were spying on him first, but it still didn't make it fair in his mind. Izuku had already figured out a few secrets, but now he knew more than he probably should, like the fact that they were talking about letting him in UA on a recommendation. And then Izuku felt even more guilty because he was not supposed to know any of this. Luckily Kakin had agreed to spar again, and it gave Deku a chance not to think about his moral issues. Deku had originally thought the rooftop watchers would leave after an hour or two. A whole afternoon later though, and they were still there. And Izuku had tried not to listen anymore, really he had, but his ears just kept picking up bits of conversation here and there. Anything from complimenting Hez and Kakin's dedication, talking about them cleaning the beach, weak points in their sparring matches, all the way to how they were formally going to introduce themselves. But Principal Nezu and All Might were not planning on formally speaking to Izuku for almost a week. And now with Kakin leaving and with the stress of too many secrets weighing down on him, Deku decided just to rip the band-aid off. So, as soon as Kakin was out of sight, Izuku turned and marched straight up to the building, and thanks to some strength and a little bit of balance, he quickly scaled up 4 stories of wall, and pulled himself up to the rooftop. Right where 2 very astonished and surprised people were waiting for him. Well, if you could call Principal Nezu a people, that is. All Might, no Mr. Yagi, was definitely human, and a very surprised one at that, with his jaw hanging open ever so slightly, and his eyes just starting at Deku, like he had just done something a pro had not seen before. All Might could jump higher than 4 floors after all, but then again maybe Izuku could now too. Nezu's face, on the other hand, had quickly gone from surprise to intrigue, and thankfully he spoke first. Hello there Midoriya, Principal Nezu spoke happily like he had just found a new toy. How did you know we were here? Deku looked back and forth between the smiling Nezu and the panicking Mr. Yagi, and finally, Izuku could not take it, and bowed quickly before starting his apology. I'm so sorry. Izuku started. I have empowered hearing, and you were talking about me, and I listened when I should not have. I tried to stop, but I still overheard small bits. I apologize. I'm sorry Principal Nezu. I'm sorry All Might. I wouldn't do it again. A sudden gasp cut Izuku off, and oh, yeah, that was one of those things he was not supposed to know. It was Mr. Yagi up here, not in costume. I see. Principal Nezu thankfully broke the awkwardness. And what else did you overhear, young Midoriya? Well, you see, I actually figured that one out myself, Izuku stated nervously. Nezu's eyebrows went up, if that was possible. Really, now? Please explain. Deku swallowed and took a second before he started to explain. Well, I know you have since read the paperwork the hospital gave you, about how my remnants work. So you see, once I had activated the remnant I deduced it must have come from All Might. It was then Netsu looked like he wanted to cut him off, but Deku kept talking. No, it really must have. The remnant I have is scarily powerful, so it must have come from someone unbelievably so. All Might was not the only one on my list, but I cross-referenced with people who I had healed, and that's when I found out Mr. Yagi had connections to All Might, worked for him too. But there is not a single photo or reference to the two in the same room at the same time. Not only that, but the timeline fits. All Might disappeared for 2 months, about the time I estimate he was injured, and has slowly been sighted less and less. And I mean Mr. Yagi was the one I healed, and you don't even change your hair. I was not that hard to figure out. By the time Deku was done he had to take a big breath in and out again. Mr. Yagi was just looking at him strangely, but Nezu was smiling. Very good Midoriya. Nezu said, nodding. Anything else? Deku loved to analyze things, that was no secret, so he went on. Well, I did hear you mention an all for one once or twice in comparison to my quirk. Both Mr. Yagi and Nezu tensed a bit. By the way, you were talking made me first assume it was a person, but then you directly compared all for one to my regenerate, and I knew it also had to be a quirk. I decided from there that you either call this person by their quirk name or it is an alias. I can also assume by the tone of your voices that this person is not a good one, a villain, am I correct? Nezu just nodded again and waved Deku on for more. Okay. So a villain. A bad one. One that most likely operates under the radar, because I have never heard of him before, and I've heard of pretty much everyone who has been either on live TV or in the papers. I can also only assume by the comparison to my quirk and the name that this all for one either somehow has multiple quirks, or had a quirk that makes it appear like he does, like mine. Deku trailed off for a second, as something slick and oily settled into his gut. He turned to Mr. Yagi, who had gone a shade pale. Was he sir? I mean sir. All Might. Was all for one the one who hurt you? Deku had hoped he was wrong, but it fit, and Mr. Yagi had flinched before when his name was said, and it scared Izuku. Sadly, Mr. Yagi just looked defeated, and somehow slumped as he seemed to grow twice as big into the All Might Deku knew. You are correct my boy, on all accounts. All Might spoke solemnly. Right before my 2-month disappearance, I was in a serious fight as you had theorized. And it was indeed with all for one. It nearly killed me, but it's okay, you don't have to fear Deku. Why? Because I am here. And I am here today in perfect health thanks to you, young Midoriya. And I did not get to truly thank you before, but from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You have given me life again. So many emotions turned inside of Deku. He had become less of a crybaby working at the hospital, but even so, he felt tears gather in his eyes, as he not only thought about All Might being hurt so badly, but his heartfelt thank you too. And All Might bless him must have sensed Izuku's inner turmoil because he got up and motioned Izuku in for a hug. Izuku took it, without thought. Hugging All Might was the best. Even so, Izuku let out a small sob and choked, "I'm so sorry." There, young Midoriya, there's nothing to be sorry about. All Might hushed him, "You healed me, everything is fine now." Izuku hugged All Might a little tighter. "I'll make sure you're never injured ever again," he mumbled, and he would make sure of it, but for now, it was time to let go. Or well, Deku would have let go of the hug, if All Might had not just wrapped his arms tighter around Izuku than before. Oh, he must have heard that. So Deku hugged All Might until the hug started to become a little suffocating, and thank God that Nezu took that second to scold All Might on crushing the boy. All Might had stepped away looking sheepish and much better than he had earlier. "I'm so sorry," Izuku said again, tears clearing up. "I'm sorry you got hurt, I'm sorry I had to heal you, and now have part of your quirk as a remnant, and I'm sorry All for One is still a threat." "How do you know that?" Nezu asked then. "Oh, I don't, but you were using present tense when discussing them. Normally if a person is dead or even in prison, people will use past tense as All for One still a threat." And Izuku watched as Nezu and All Might eyed each other having a silent conversation, and it was then when Izuku realized this was none of his business, that he should not even know any of this. "Never mind," Izuku said quickly. "I don't need to know, it's not my place. If I had just told you of the consequences of my quirk, I would never have gotten this remnant, and then you would never have been here for me to hear. Young Midoriya, the way I remember it, it was my fault I did not pick up on how you explained your quirk or think of the outcomes if you healed me, not yours. So you're not upset with me?" Izuku asked. All Might just laughed, big and bold and booming. "Upset? Why on earth would I be upset, my boy? You gave me back my life, maybe even extended it if what I am and told is true. Your healing was the most amazing thing that could have happened to me, and even if I had understood at the time I would have still let you heal me. The only thing I would have done was told you the truth from the start, my boy. The remnant of One for All is not giving you any trouble, is it, young Midoriya?" Izuku was instantly relieved that All Might was not upset, and began to shake his head no, and then thought about it. "It is incredibly hard to control, sir. I mean, it's amazing. It like supercharges all of my other remnants. But it's very easy to push it too far, and then I break stuff." All Might looked worried then, but it's okay. My regenerate can heal me very quickly, as long as I eat and drink enough and take all my vitamins. But All for One allowed me to save that girl during the bus incident. So it was the best thing that could have happened to me too." All Might chuckled, "It must have been fate then. However, young Midoriya, how you put it, the bus incident and the state of your quirk, is what Nezu and I were originally going to discuss with you." Nezu then took his chance to step fluidly back into the conversation. "Yes indeed. I'm unsure if you heard anything about your future at UA. "Yes sir. I heard you discussing putting me in on a recommendation. But I also heard you say that you already have the max number of recommendation students for my year, and I refuse to bump anyone out of the class, so I will just take the exam." "Midoriya," Nezu began, "do you have any idea how lucky you have been these past few years working at the hospital in private? Do you have any idea how many people even now want a piece of you and your quirk?" Izuku did know. Thinking back to the first hospital he tried to work at, and the people who would track him down. But had he attracted any real danger? Nezu must have picked up on his thought process from there. There are people in this world that, given the nature of your quirk, might want to harm you. Now it's not too bad now, but it was then that Deku's eyes flew wide. "Sir, there's something you have to know. My quirk at the remnant works both ways." "What?" "When I get part of their quirk, they get some regeneration abilities of their own. Kaken, my friend I was with earlier, has been healed by me so many times he can regrow a limb by himself if he lost one, and I know of at least one other case of it happening. Why was this not in the files the hospital gave us? I only just discovered it myself when I was reunited with my friend. I have to heal people a lot for the transfer. Most people would never get enough of my quirk to do anything, and then even if they did, they would have to get seriously injured for it to activate and think hard to heal themselves, which most people would never think to do." "Ah, I see." Nezu finished. "Yes sir," Izuku said as he turned to All Might. "By my estimation, even you should have some healing abilities, All Might. So the next time you are hurt, just tell your body to heal itself, and I think for most injuries, you would be able to handle it with some practice." "You gave me part of your quirk?" All Might asked, slightly taken back. Then looking thoughtful, "How much healing are we talking about, young Midoriya?" "Well, I theorized by past experience that the remnants built were at roughly 20% power of the originals, so you could probably heal your own broken bones and cuts and scrapes, maybe a bullet wound with practice." But the conversation direction was derailed by Nezu. "Midoriya," he started seriously, "this just adds to the danger you will face. Villains, All for One, will want to find you and capture you. But I can heal myself and I'm pretty good at defending myself. Can you teleport? Communicate through telepathy to tell us if you are in danger? Turn invisible and run away? No? The most he could do was a minor hide in shadows that only worked in almost no light. Nezu sighed. What I'm saying is that when the nature of your quirk gets out, you will not only have the public beating down your door, but villains as well, ones that would not hesitate to use you for their own gain. Izuku gulped. And this is why Midoriya, I think it's for the best if you do not publicly participate in the entrance exam. But sir, you don't understand. The entrance exam means something to me. Since we were 4 years old, my best friend and I have been planning for that day. Where we would meet, what we would have for breakfast, battle strategies. I promised him I would be there that day. Please, sir, I want to go to UA, and I want to be at the entrance exam. I don't have my life planned past that day. Nezu nodded and smiled. Well, I said publicly, young hero. Meaning your name must stay out of it. We announced the participants and winners for the world to see in hopes of jump-starting their careers, and even have a short bio written up of the top scores. Do you want the world seeing a bio of you on the UA site? No? Izuku replied, sounding more like a question. Right? Nezu said. It is also not unheard of for students that don't make it in to go right to the press with new information on future heroes. It would draw unnecessary attention to you and let the world know where you are and what you can do. It's just safer to be one of the 4 recommendation students, and we can hold off on exposing you as long as possible. Sir, with all due respect, I really do not want to replace another student. I'm sure all 4 of them worked really hard too. Nezu hummed for a second but then nodded. A noble idea, and I think I have just the solution. I have not done it in some years, and Endeavor will certainly throw a fit, but I can make you an odd 5th recommendation student. As always, class will have 21 students in it then, but he normally kicks out a few students anyway, so it should not be a problem. So what do you say, Mr. Midoriya? Will you be the class A121st student? Izuku thought about it for a second. Wait, why would Endeavor throw a fit? And who kicks out students? But ultimately started to nod. It sounds perfect, sir. But could I still just go to the entrance exam? If I didn't do it as a participant and be announced publicly, I wouldn't use my remnants or go after robots or anything. I wouldn't get any points. I just want to be there and like run around and heal people. Would that be okay? Nezu then looked at Izuku strangely for a second. You want to run around and heal people the entire time and not earn any points? Izuku shifted foot to foot. That sentence was strange, Nezu putting fluctuations where they did not make sense. Yes. And it must have been the right thing to say, because then Nezu broke into a maniacal shit-eating grin, and for whatever reason Izuku got the feeling he had made some great inside joke without meaning to. Well, my boy. I do not see a problem with it then. As long as it's kept quiet and we hand out extra NDAs this year. Nezu spoke through his smile. Well then I think I will have to meet with you and your mother again, as soon as I can get things arranged. But for now, maybe you should think about getting home. It was then Izuku noticed how late it was getting. The sun nearly set on the horizon, and twilight creeping up around them. Though Deku could see in partial darkness, so it did not bother him much, but much longer and his mother would start to worry. However, before Izuku could speak again, All Might cut into the conversation. Young Midoriya, I still cannot believe what you have done for me, but now I want to ask another favor. I cannot feel the healing remnant you say is inside me like I can my own quirk, and I do not feel comfortable leaving you with 20% of One for All without knowing how to control it. So if you would you teach me about your quirk and trade for learning about mine? And gods, if Izuku didn't just want to jump up and down like a 3-year-old chanting yes, yes, yes. But instead, he asked, will you help me and Kakin with our hand-to-hand combat too? Which surprised both himself and All Might. I mean, not that your offer is not great. It's amazing. I will defiantly do everything, anything you want. It's just that you had so many useful comments about Kakin and I sparring earlier and he was cut off. My All Might laughing again. I would love to help the two of you, my boy. He said, yelled, I am going to be a teacher at UA starting next year, so this will be good practice. And every hero needs to practice. And Izuku felt like he was going to die of joy. Thank you. Thank you so much, All Might. And you, Nezu. Indeed, my boy. All Might said, yelled again. I will meet you here at noon tomorrow. But not, I do believe it's time for you to get going home now. Do you want to lift down? As he was saying this, Nezu had climbed onto All Might's shoulder, and All Might had walked to the edge of the building. No thanks. I got myself up, I can get myself down. And to prove it, Deku leaped off the side of the building and landed in a parkour roll, his regeneration taking care of anything quicker than he could hurt or even bleed on the sidewalk. In retrospect, it probably was not as cool as Izuku thought it would have been because it earned him concerned looks, so Izuku quickly said thank you again and goodbye, and scrambled away home. It was only partway there, after a text to his mom letting her know he was on his way and not to worry, that he realized he had now met All Might twice, and still did not get his autograph.